You know.
Hey, everybody, welcome to another enlightening and educational episode of The Quick Draw. I'm your host, Mike, and with me is my co-host, John, at Firelight Phoenix now, right?
Yes, yes.
I still think we should have gone with at not gay John, but that's just me.
No. I mean,
so exciting week, couple of weeks in Twitter news, apparently. So John, is it Jim Treacher? Is that his name? He got banned today. That was unexpected. James Gunn, was he the producer, director of Guardian of the Galaxy? He got canned by Marvel. We're going to talk a little bit about that today. And then I just got off a nice 7-week jail time. My first offense on the podcast account, and I got banned for 7 days. Apparently, you can't point out that leftists have their own extremist groups that are violent. Especially if one of them is named Nation of Islam. That apparently offends people.
Yeah,
so
Islam in its name,
it was just so. It's been an exciting couple weeks. People getting banned left and right. With us to discuss that is a really cool guest. You probably know him originally as Road Beer. Now he goes by Ordy Packard. He has his own experiences with getting banned or getting canned by Twitter fascists. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. I want to talk about the obsession that leftists have with deplatforming dissenting views, whether it's on their side or the other side. And with us to discuss that is a guy who is no stranger to getting nuked and getting his account canned for having unpopular opinions. Welcome to the program, Morty. How you doing?
Hey, thanks for having me, guys. I'm doing great. I'm actually 4 solid weeks without getting suspended on this account. So that's
do you have like a sign in your workplace? It's like days without incidents, days without banning.
And erase it.
Yeah, I gotta try to erase it.
You erase it, and it's just like, okay, we're back to zero.
Right. Yeah, if it wasn't for the kindness of people to create accounts for me, I don't think I could get back on Twitter.
Oof. Yeah, no, that's just horrible.
Twitter is that thing that you hate it, but you keep going back to it. It's like one of those women with an abusive guy. It's like where they go back even though it's like
it's a drug addiction. Let's just call it what it is. A fucking drug addiction, okay?
It's both. It's meth and abusive relationship all rolled into one. Sounds like the early '90s.
You see that one little comic strip I retweeted earlier today where it said something like, "Oh, it's my first day on Twitter," and it opens. It's like, "Oh my God!" It's like I think I've opened a portal to hell, and it's like hair starts burning. And so I was like, "How was your first day on Twitter?" It's like I think I'm addicted already.
Which that's kind of funny considering who writes Dilbert. Like his opinions are a little off the.
Yeah, Scott Adams.
Off the beaten path. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, everybody seemed so normal until the election.
Right.
And then 2016, everybody just let their freak flag fly.
Why not? I mean, at that point, obviously both parties.
LOL, nothing matters, right?
Right.
But the past couple of weeks have been really interesting to see, and I wrote a thread about this a couple weeks ago about the cruelty of censorship, right? That when you censor someone, when you try to silence them, one, you're not actually going to do it. Like they'll just go underground. They'll go to Reddit. They'll go to 4chan. They'll go wherever they have an audience, right? And on top of that, it inflicts a form of cruelty because you're actually depriving people of. So I likened it to basically telling, for example, homosexuals that they can't be gay, right? Because and someone who's homosexual will say something like, "This is part of who I am. This is my identity. I can't change this, and you can't tell me who I can and can't love." And I get that. I agree with that, right? That's an integral part of who you are. You can't change those feelings. But I make the argument that it's the same thing about conscience. You can't change your conscience. You can't change how you feel about something. Right or wrong.
Well, yeah,
so suppressing that's just going to harden people and make them angry.
Well, you made a good point there, and that's it's conversion therapy for social media. We're just going to keep banning you, we're going to keep knocking you off until you think like we do.
Right.
And yeah, it's absurd because, you know, the left is supposed to be this great marketplace of ideas, but really it's just one idea and whatever happens to be floating at that time. You know, I mean, you just look at how they move the goalposts with every opinion that they have. And this is why you have the blowback today that you do, with everybody losing their minds on social media and getting everybody fired from their jobs.
And I might add that banning people and trying to censor things actually just makes it more attractive to people, because to the point that actually sometimes the irony is that the protesting and the constant censorship actually works against the very thing, even when the message is genuinely not a good one. Again, I always cite that example of Richard Spencer. You remember him? And
oh yeah,
he went
White Flower.
Yeah, right, exactly. And I think he went to like the University of Florida or something. And you look at the like, they had all these protesters, like maybe 60 of them, and you see them in the background and they're protesting and yelling, and we don't want racism here, blah blah blah. But then the camera pans and shows the actual audience that's watching, and there's maybe 10. I was like, 10, 12, and it's like, you outnumber the audience. Do you think maybe that your protests actually are drawing more attention to him than he can draw to himself?
Chick-fil-A is a great example of that. Right. I mean, you look at all the blowback Chick-fil-A have, and now they're huge. You know, they're bigger than they were before, and everybody loved them before. But now it's like, got to get me some hate chicken.
I went there. I love the stuff.
Conversion therapy chicken.
Yep.
Right.
It'll make you not gay if you eat it. Apparently.
I remember the thread you did on that. But yeah.
I mean, that's a really good example. It's like, and I think the only difference between Chick-fil-A and social media is Chick-fil-A exists in a free market, right? If you go around in a free market and you start telling people, don't eat that delicious chicken because it's hateful, people are gonna be like, fuck you, I do what I want. whereas like social media, it's not a free market of ideas. There really isn't a free market with social media right now.
No,
Facebook
there isn't.
It's garbage.
Yeah. Yeah, and Gab, I mean, they fucked up early and often, and they could have been.
Hey, that's a good philosophy.
Yeah.
I'm an engineer. I can appreciate that.
But the one thing, like when you ban people too, you and I were talking about this a couple of weeks ago, is that each time that I have been nuked, each time I have suspended, I have come back stronger than before. It's like when I was Road Beer the first, I had like 4K followers and I was averaging maybe 200, 300, 400,000 interactions a month. Now with this Ordi, I have 1,200 followers and I get 1.8 million on Twitter. So I mean, they've just made me. They've consolidated the people who listen to me, the people who read me, the people who put up with my whatever it is I do, and and I get.
We all got our garbage takes, man. We don't judge.
Yeah. So. But I mean, that's kind of, they've created that environment. I could have just been a quiet little nobody sitting out there making gamer jokes, and now I get 1.8 million impressions a month. I mean, I don't know. I can't.
I think John alludes to it, right? When you, and this is something that I find so shocking about Jim Treacher getting banned, right? He doesn't go like the least controversial conservative accounts on Twitter has just got permanently suspended, and you're like, the fuck?
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
I honestly, I think what it is, I've had a sneaking suspicion for months now that Twitter really does want to get rid of the centrists. They really do want to get rid of the sensible conservatives. They don't want to get rid of the alt-right. They don't want to get rid of the anti-Semites because they like their straw man, right?
Right. Yep.
And obviously they don't want to get rid of the left-wing crazies because they like the left-wing crazies. They like that extremism. They'll nuke them every now and then to give the air of impartiality. But I mean, anybody with a brain can see that it's not impartial. They enforce the rules selectively. And I think what happens, the phenomenon you see there is like, okay, when you nuke someone, when you ban them, when you censor them, right, you're calling attention to them. You're saying, these people are bad. These people have shocking views. They have things that you don't want to hear. Well, people are going to get curious. They're going to be like, really? And they may not even agree. They may just say, oh, they may just want to, watch the train wreck.
Yeah.
And then they go, and they say, wait, this guy's making sense.
I mean, he's not a salon con, but, he's, but yeah.
Right. He's not this person isn't bad. He's not crazy. He's not anti-Semitic. He's not racist. All the things they said he was. He's not promoting violence. You know, all these things they said they banned him for. He's not doing these things.
But I think,
and so it does two things. One, people start listening to you. They start saying, "Well, okay, wait, this guy isn't as bad as they said," and I actually kind of think some of the stuff he's saying is making sense. Two, it discredits the opposition. The very people that were trying to convince everyone that you were you're a horrible person, they look insane. They look irrational. And so now people are like, okay, I'm not going to listen to you anymore. I'm going to listen to this guy.
Right.
And I think the goal is to group together the people, like, you know, because again, I quote him a lot, but you know, Ben Shapiro, he points out the goal is to group together the really crazy ones with the not crazy ones. Because again, I just saw a tweet recently. I forget where it was from. I know it was some major news outlet, but basically saying that, you know, something about conservative speakers like Ben Shapiro, Richard Spencer, and Milo Yiannopoulos. And it's like, okay, the three of them are completely separate cases, but they would like you to believe, oh, these are all the people that fall into the rubric of conservative. Even though Spencer isn't conservative, he tells you that face front. Yiannopoulos calls himself that, but really not so much. And then Shapiro's the only one in that bunch that actually is a conservative. But
one of these things are not like the other.
Right, but they want you to believe they're all the same thing, because basically, if you can believe they're all the same, if you see Spencer, you think, oh my God, this is horrible, which he is. And then you think, well, that's conservatism. They're all conservative because, you know, because they look at the crazy one and think they all are the same, and it's like not even close. But that's the point.
It's the same tactic they use when they talk about right wing versus left wing, right? And they say the Nazis weren't socialists; they were right wing, and socialists are left wing. It's like, that's just, guys, that's such a bullshit argument. Anybody who understands the left right dichotomy in Europe versus the left right dichotomy in America understands the difference, right? And anyone who actually speaks German or can Google, you know, knows what Nazi was short for. It was short for Nationalist Socialist. Fuck off with that argument.
Well, but they need Goering and Goebbels and all of them talking about socialism, and you know, it was just basically, they also don't understand horseshoe theory, where, you know, when you get far enough to the right, you are now on the left, and vice versa. And anyway, it's
that's a European model, and I've never understood that, because when you think like the American model always made more sense to me, right? Anarchy on the right, totalitarianism on the left, everything else in between. With constitutionalism, federalism, American federalism being pretty much the centrist view, maybe right of center.
Even if you were to take it that much further out, if you were to stretch the left-right paradigm out even further, is that, you know, constitutionalism is especially American government 1787, you're looking as close to anarchy as you can possibly get and still have a functional government.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, that's, being a minarchist, that's one of the things I look at, like, yes, that's the government I want. You know, the night watchman state, we're just there to make sure everybody plays nice, and that's it. And, you know, all you states do your thing, and we do the treaties with the other countries. And here's military.
There was actually an analogy made by Stephen Crowder. I liked it. It was the government should be like a hockey referee, and he said specifically hockey, where you know, the referee sets the rules, but basically allows the players to kind of work out their own stuff, you know. And that's basically, I think, what the founders of this country, I think that was basically their vision. Obviously not the hockey thing, because, you know, but they had that idea of what government should be, because they basically saw government as a necessary evil, because people are imperfect and they need some governance, but we also have to keep in mind the people in the government are made up of the same imperfect people, and therefore it has to be restrained. Otherwise, it does what any individual person would do, which is they seek their own ambition, they have their own interests, and it just becomes a male. So they said, okay, let's take government and purposely turn all those ambitions against each other, so that it, you know, because again, it's why it is that people will say, oh my God, the government is gridlocked. Yes, it's supposed to be. That's a
feature, not a bug.
You know, it doesn't get much done. Again, it's not supposed to. It's not supposed to get much done. It's supposed to do very, very little. Again, that's why we have Article 1, Section 8. It's, again, that list is short because it's not supposed to get a lot done. So when your government's not getting a lot done, that's a good thing.
Yeah. When I'm looking at the propaganda for a candidate that comes out every 2 to 4 years, I'll sit there and if they rattle off a whole bunch of bills that they've sponsored or co-sponsored, I don't care what party they're with. That one's got to go. That one's in the trash.
Right.
Because I mean, you're trying to show, hey, look at how much I'm doing. That's not what. Yeah.
And I think people.
Well, I do have to say, one of the funny things about Trump being president is how he has magically gotten the left to adopt smaller government. They seem to flip flop. Like 1 minute they're like, no, the government shouldn't have this much power, and then they realize, wait, that wasn't our position 2 years ago. So then they go to the opposite extreme and say things like, yeah, no, we absolutely need the deep state to stop Trump, and you're just like,
the executive power, the executive branch has too much power. Well, why weren't you saying that when President Selfie Stick had his pin in his phone?
Right, exactly. This is what I was saying about the whole border thing, where it was just like, hey, we're gonna, he's the one with the pen in the phone, but he tried to play act like, oh, the Republicans. I was there because I attended a protest here actually about that, but I distinctly remember that what he tried to do was pull these kids in from Central America or so, put them in places like warehouses or whatever on the border, and say the only reason they're in warehouses instead of here living wonderful lives in the country is because the evil, heartless Republicans are stopping me. And I was like, what happened to Mr. Pen and Phone? What happened there?
Right.
I thought you could just pen and phone them into the country. No, it was political theater, and now that it's Trump doing it, suddenly they forgot all about, oh yeah, Obama did this and we didn't say anything. But now all of a sudden we're very concerned about the well-being of these children.
Yeah, and that lasted all of 2 weeks, which just, once again, this goes with the hypocrisy of the left. That was the worst thing ever. Human rights crisis until Trump tweeted something.
Right.
Well, that's the crazy thing about this whole thing, right? The left has just gone full on insane. Like, they are foaming at the mouth, and they're doing everything in their power to silence conservative voices. And I don't understand it. Like, I hate communists, for example, right? I crack helicopter jokes all the time because my father-in-law lived during the golpe and the coup by Pinochet, right? He lived during Allende and he lived during Pinochet. So I crack helicopter jokes all the time. And like, I hate communists. I will never shut them up, though. I will never say, you know what? You're a commie and you shouldn't have a right to say your opinion. You don't have a right to blast on Twitter. I want them to blast on Twitter. I want them to say their stupid ass opinions so that I can debunk them. Right. So I can point out, guys, economically, you're full of shit, okay? Philosophically, full of shit, all right? Marx contributed nothing to the field of economy or philosophy.
The best thing you could do is let them talk. I mean, look at Alexandria Quetzalcoatl-Cortez, or whatever, Lipstick Lenin. The more she talks, the more you realize. I mean, even Joe Lieberman came out and said, "We can't back this chick. We can't do it."
I really like the one that came up on Twitter, She Guevara. That was the best. She Guevara was the best one.
The only reason that nobody caught that Joe Lieberman said it was because when he said it, it put everyone to sleep because he probably said it in his normal voice, you know. Probably was just like, we can't back this because and everyone fell asleep, and that's why no one remembers that he said it. Because
and that's the thing, like,
who can make frickin'. Oh God, we were just talking about it before the show too. I just drew a blank. Mailman Dad.
Kasich.
If anyone can make Kasich look animated, it's Joe Lieberman. Lieberman makes Kasich look like Bernie Sanders.
It's like, I mean, that's the thing. Like, and especially now, there's this kind of uptick, I guess, of like millennials that are like, "Yay, socialism and socialism, great." And the best argument against them is to just let them talk.
Right?
They open their mouths and you're like, "Holy shit, you're an idiot! Do you even know what the fuck you're talking about? Shut up!"
Because here's the fun thing about it. When they see socialism, they mean the same thing Bernie Sanders said. And I love getting a kick out of the fact that if you point to Venezuela, they'll be like, no, that wasn't us. But yet they'll say, no, like Denmark. And Denmark's like, dude, shut up. Okay, we're not socialists.
we're not socialists.
You know, Bernie Sanders out here, we are trying to point to Denmark as an example of democratic socialism. Denmark's like, dude, please shut up. We're not socialists. For the love of God, shut up. And that's what they mean. Because when you point them to real socialist countries, they're like, oh, no, it's not real socialism. No, that
real socialism has never been tried.
No, of course it never has been. You know, because
I think when you have an idea that every time they try it never ends up actually getting tried, that's called failure to launch.
Right.
Well, that's not an idea that's viable from the get-go. Right, but I mean, here's the thing, the left is, and socialism is a good example of this, right? Isn't the first act of any totalitarian regime, or I shouldn't, maybe not the first act, but the defining act of any totalitarian regime is trying to control people's speech, people's thoughts, the way people act on their conscience. I mean, you know, and when it doesn't affect you, if what I do doesn't affect you, and you're still trying to control me and tell me how to live my life or do business or associate with one another, that's the act of a tyrant. Like at what point do we as Americans say, wait, I'm King George in this thing here. This might be a bad idea. Or, oh shit, I'm acting just like Joe Stalin. This is bad. I shouldn't do this.
But you know, Stalin was, you know, well, it's like again, we go back to the Che Guevara T-shirts. You know, all the stuff where it's like, oh, I wear this. I'm betting you anything. Most of the people who wear those shirts, if you ask them what did he actually do, I don't think any of them know. I think.
Okay, that's good. Okay, so you bring up a good point. Che Guevara, right? People wear Che Guevara shirts because, like you said, they're fucking idiots. They don't know what he did. They don't know his views. They're completely ignorant in history. But people know, I mean, there are bad examples of totalitarianism, right? People are not so stupid, I hope, that they think Hitler was a good guy. I mean, okay, there's some people that say that. I hope. Right.
Mussolini, right?
Right. I mean, there are, you know, you can point to somebody that somebody, you know, says, oh, yeah, I don't want to be like that guy. Right. And one thing that if you're pointing to a totalitarian or a tyrant, they all have one thing in common. They all tried to silence people who disagreed with them. They all quashed dissent, either through violence or blacklisting or whatever means available to them. So what I don't understand, and both sides do this, right? You know, we've seen this. We've seen people on the far right, people on the far left, and rather than try to talk to each other, and social media encourages this behavior, right? They don't try to talk to each other. They just try to either outshout each other, and when they can't outshout each other, they try to nuke each other.
Yeah.
And at what point do you say, I'm acting just like every tyrant in the history of tyranny?
Well, and that's just it, because they don't... There's no self-examination. On social media, there's zero self-awareness. I mean, I think that's a defining trait of social media is you check your self-awareness the second you log in, because, you know, I mean, and you're right. It's left or right. It's because I have had my temporary suspensions, my Twitmos, and when I could get my account back, that's always been in arguments against the left. When my account has been completely nuked, has always been when arguments against the right. And it's not even like I'm arguing against the right. I'm just saying this is not the path you want to go down. And when I try to call them out on that, that's when I get my their little DM brigade group against me, spam reporting me, and then I never get that account back. And I mean, on the left is really good at using social media the way it's supposed to be designed, just muting or blocking. They go away. You know, I mean, I get my scalp then because they blocked me. Hooray. But the right, they'll just sit there and they'll get their little DM circle, and then they'll keep spam reporting you until you're toast. You know, because you dare defend one of their sensibilities, whether it's true cons or elements of, you know, HT or whatever. So
well, yeah, but that's a fair criticism. But at the same time, like, it's still Twitter's fault. Right, they created that system, and they refuse to fix it because they know. I think it's because they know that the people that are getting damaged by it or the most impacted by it negatively are the people on the right, and the people on the right that say that do offer dissenting views within their own group. The last thing the left wants, I think, is a unified conservative movement. Right, that's always been their advantage over us. Is, you know, it's like they know how to organize
with the centrists. It's the centrists they want out. So anybody who attacks the left and the right, you know, the libertarians or whatever, who just, you know, call bullshit on both sides, those are the ones Twitter want gone, because that's not eyeballs. There's no rage there. You know, that's just nobody cares if you're making a salient point. They want you to be able to scream epithets at the other person.
Now, here's the thing.
You should just scream more of those, though.
Epithets, not epitaphs. But anyway, sorry, I had to say grammar Nazi. But
you're such a nerd, John. God.
Here's the thing, though. I will say this, though, because I always hear, you know, both sides do it, and they do. But, however, and far be it from me, I love to be the ecumenist, but still, I have to say here, when the left does it, it is actually a culmination of their philosophy. When the right does it, is a violation of their philosophy. I think that is different. That, yes, there are people on the right who shut down speech, but that's a violation of the philosophy that the right has. When the left shuts down speech, that's a fulfillment of their philosophy. That's what they do. You know, there's an old quote Ann Coulter said years ago. I read it in one of her books, and I actually held it to heart because it's so true. And she said that the left's idea of fair is they get to talk and no one gets to respond. So that's why for them, when they shut down speech, it's why they do it more consistently, I would argue, because that's what leftism aims for. It's not what we aim for on the right, because even though people may do it, it is not what people on the right philosophically are for.
No, I agree to that point completely. I mean, if you look at what happened today with James Gunn, Michael Ian Black, Patton Oswalt, those were all organized like he could organize himself out of a wet paper bag. Those were all started by Cernovich. And Cernovich has the tag of being on the right. Well, I mean, universal base income isn't very right to me, but that's one of his things. So whatever, you know. So, but I mean, you're right, and that's a violation of the right's principles to go after these guys to shut them down,
right?
To get them fired. I mean, we don't want that. That's counterproductive to helping our case.
Well, but now, not just to play devil's advocate here, right? What do you say then to the people that on the right that say, well, these are the new rules. The left does this to us. Now it's time to give them a taste of their own medicine, and hopefully they'll back off. And then we can go back to playing nice and talking and engaging in civil discourse.
But the thing is that the left won't acknowledge the rules. The rule change. All they'll do is just move the goalposts. I saw it today, you know, where I was in an argument. I was talking about this exact very thing, and some guys said, well, you know, they were just telling jokes, and you got to look at the intent of the heart. And I just came back and went, what was Adam Baldwin's intent in the Stanley Kubrick film when he was playing Animal Mother that they went after him for during Gamergate? They tried to throw a line he said in a movie as indicative of who he is. So,
right.
No, that's a selling point. That's a selling point. My big concern is, and I think you bring up a good point with how they don't change, right? The left doubles down on dumb. Yeah. Always, every time. Again, but this is the problem. When you, and this was a point, this was a point that I made in another thread that I wrote about the cruelty of censorship, is that when you get to a point, right? Why is civil discourse so important? Well, when you have two groups, right, and they disagree, and there's no way to reconcile those disagreements, right? It's either through civil discourse or negotiation. You have two other choices, right? If you have a disagreement, you have three choices. One, you can try to work it out, right? I give something, we can compromise, we can negotiate, we can try to persuade each other, and if that works, great. That's the best outcome, right? The other option is we walk away. We say, okay, look, we're never going to come to an agreement. Here's your plot of land. Here's my plot of land. Let's just stick to our plots of land, and never the twain shall meet. And we'll just we'll agree to disagree, and we'll just get along. We won't like each other. We won't ever agree, but we're not going to hurt each other, right? The only other option, if you can't get away from someone and you can't negotiate with them, your only other option is force, right? You have to pummel the shit out of them. And that's the big concern, right? That was something that Jesse Kelly brought up with his article about the divorce. Is if we don't get to a point where we just we've already acknowledged we can't talk to each other. That's the state we're at right now. We can't talk to each other. Our only other option then is to agree to walk away from each other, which is what he proposes, or we're going to have to duke it out. Right. And I think, what are your thoughts on that, Irving?
Well, that's completely right. We joke about how the Civil War is coming, and I've kind of gamed that whole thing in my head, and it's going to be urban versus rural. And rural has all the guns and the food and the water and the minerals, so and the power. So, good luck, urbanites. But no, I mean I don't think I think it's going to take a 9/11 event for us to all get back together again. I hate to say that, but it's going to take Yellowstone blowing. It's going to take a terrorist attack. It's going to take something for all of us to realize once again, none of this means anything. The daily outrage machine, or what are we pissed off about today? That's just going to keep feeding itself until something like that happens. And I mean,
I'm just going to say, call me a little bit morbid, but I'm still just because I guess I'm just being incredibly mean here, but I just, in some senses, I want that civil war just because I'm waiting for the moment that, because remember, you said that the rural people are the ones who have all the guns. Not only are the ones that have all the guns, but they're also the only ones who know how they work. So the thing is that I'm waiting for that moment where somebody comes out from the left with the AR-15 and pulls the trigger thinking it's going to spray bullets everywhere, and it fires one shot, and they're like, "Yeah, I don't get it. What's happening?" And then they just end up getting shot.
Well, when they twist the suppressor on it, you can still tell where they're firing from.
I'm sorry, I'm waiting.
Wait, you mean it doesn't go pew pew? No, it doesn't go pew pew.
Because what it's going to be is it's going to be all those guys who are like, I was traumatized when I fired an AR-15 at the range. It's going to be those guys.
I got PTSD, man. Oh,
it's going to be so funny.
Well, I've been enjoying watching some of these counter protesters. Did you see the video with the Proud Boy who kind of knocked out 3 Antifa?
Yeah. I mean,
oh God, are you talking about that one? I saw that one where it was just a perfect KO shot where the guy tries to hit him with a baton or something.
Yeah.
Blocks it, knocks him the fuck out.
Right.
But that's my point. That's where we're headed. Those little pockets of violence, right? And these are happening in the very blue areas like Portland, Oregon, right?
Where
the left is totally convinced that they have all the power. They have, they have the numbers and what have you, and they're the majority. And then they go to try to use force, and then they get knocked on their ass.
Right.
I mean, I can't understand how you want that. Why would you want that in any scenario?
But that's a metaphor for everything that the left does. Everything they try to do or they try to attack, they just get knocked on their ass because their momentum is unsustainable. They don't have the strength to follow through on the punch, whether it be in the media. I mean, we saw that in Gamergate where, that just started out as a consumer boycott. And then the SJWs all got all involved, screeching about everything they were screeching about during
sexism, racism, bigotry.
And the argument was, you want to go up against a group of people who spend 40 hours a week grinding for a hat in a video game, and you think you're going to win.
I never thought of it that way, but that makes perfect. Not even a real hat. It's a paper doll hat.
Right. Yeah, but this is what you see it now. Disney's got a hard lesson to learn. They kind of figured it out with the early Marvel movies. Winter Soldier, that was a libertarian wet dream in that movie. And in Iron Man 2, Tony Stark says, "I'm tired of the progressive agenda. It's boring." Right. And then you have Kathleen Kennedy come in on the Star Wars end of it and just say, her cis fan or her incel fanboys were taking your toy away from you. And what happened? Last Jedi and Han Solo, huge flops.
Yep.
So they're losing there too. So this is everything they do. They go to punch and then they fall short.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up the Disney thing because James Gunn getting canned by Disney. That's an interesting, I think, case study in talking about this because Disney is a family-based, company, and so you could I can see the argument being made we don't want a guy that's making pedophilia jokes or rape jokes.
Kids movies, yeah.
Yeah. On the other hand, I do wonder when are they going to can Sarah Silverman from doing another Wreck-It Ralph movie because she's done all those jokes too.
Well, and this is again, we told you guys play stupid games, win stupid prizes. You started these rules. Now we're showing you what happens when you play by them. You had it all good for a while when you got rid of Roseanne and everything else. Now elements of the right have figured out how to play that game. I don't agree with it. I don't think it's right, but because, you know, like we've been talking about this whole show, you want them to put their foot in their mouth. You don't want to silence them. And now, like I said, you got Cernovich going against Gunn, Ian Black, and Patton Oswalt. These guys are all three probably going to lose their jobs, and I don't know, whatever. I mean,
I'll be honest. I'm going to be honest. I have mixed feelings about that. Because on the one hand, from a principle standpoint, right, I want to have the debate. I want to argue with people. I don't, you know, a lot of conservatives are up in arms about the jokes that this guy made that were, you know, about pedophilia. You know, my biggest problem with the jokes is they weren't that funny. Well, I mean, if you're going to tell a pedophilia joke, make it a good one, okay?
Well, like, there's Buckley in Black today. He was talking about, you know, George Carlin and Richard Pryor. It's like, dude, you can't even carry their ball sweat. You're not that funny. You cannot pull off. Carlin or Pryor could have done those jokes, and it would have been funny.
Yeah. Well, have you ever watched? If you're going to enter that, watch Bo Burnham?
No.
Okay, so on Netflix, he's a really funny guy, really talented. It's his comedy routine's performance art, and he tells a funny pedophilia joke. But he plays with the idea of double standards, and you know if a girl shows off her body, she's a slut. But if I show off my body, I'm not. If I have sex with a child, I'm a pedophile. But if a kid has sex with me, I'm a pedophile again. And like that's actually was kind of funny because he's playing with double standards and he's saying something shocking. Like there's a time and a place for black humor, macabre humor. You know, you just got to know your audience. And if you're a big name in a family company, maybe that's not the best time. Like, you know, out there in public is probably not the best place for you to tell pedophile jokes.
I think leftists also seem to think like they're literally. I almost think they're relying on the idea that, well, you people on the right have this whole, you know, this ethos where you don't do this sort of thing, so rein it in. But see, I think a lot of, especially older conservatives, I think are kind of torn between the fact that, because I do this all the time, is on the one hand, I don't want to see the right adopt the tactics of the left. I don't, because I don't want to become the thing we're trying to fight. On the other hand, I gotta admit, some of it's really entertaining, you know, like, because it's a serves you right, you know, it's an I told you so type of moment where it's like, hey, you soak this up, this is what you get.
And that's why I have mixed feelings. On the one hand, I want to have the conversation. I want to tell the jokes. I want people to know, like, who stands where. On the other hand, I want to give I want to give them a taste of their own medicine.
But the left does it to themselves. I mean, the right never went after Will Wheaton and Chris Hardwick. They did that to themselves. They found themselves not pure enough to move in those circles, and they got attacked by their own tactics that they had used against others.
Right.
You know, James Gunn's biggest sin was not going back and purging his timeline before going to work for Disney.
Right. Right. And also, you know, another good point here is, and John kind of alluded to it, is the left's biggest problem with the James Gunn thing apparently seems to be that it's the right calling him out. Yeah, like that's the big argument, because it's like, well, yeah, we don't like that, but we like the fact that it's the right pointing it out even more. We just like that even more.
Right.
Yeah. No, and that's true. They don't like to have their own hypocrisy highlight, you know. They're like cockroaches scurrying in the light.
Well, plus, I think one of the reasons why I honestly believe, like, I know I have some conservative friends that don't agree with me on this, but I truly think that a lot of what drives a lot of what leftists do is, it's a quote I read. If you ever read the book Liberal Fascism by Jonah Goldberg.
Yeah.
And one of the things that he pointed out was, he said that for leftists, they're the good guys, and that's all they need to know. It's why it is that they can do things genuinely fascistic, totalitarian, bigoted, all these things, and at no point does it ever occur to them that that's what they're doing. Because in their mind, racism is something, or fascism is something. That's something other people do. We don't do that because we're the good guys, and that's their entire argument for why it can't be that. Because we're the good ones, right? So we can't.
Well, yeah. So I mean, well, when they say, you know, get back on the plantation, Uncle. That's okay because they're coming from looking out for your own good.
Right,
You know,
exactly.
you've strayed too off, so we got to bring you back into the fold.
Exactly.
And they do that with every minority bloc they've ever had
They do it with
their
gays.
hooks into that starts to stray away. So
yeah, there's a I can't remember who the guy is on Twitter. He's you know, relatively conservative, but he's a gay guy. But he gets attacked all the time. And again, all those slurs that supposedly
Chad Felix.
yeah, exactly.
oh yeah, Chad Felix,
yeah.
he's awesome.
Yeah, he gets attacked.
I love him.
I was like, literally,
No homo, but I love him.
all the stuff that people say to him, you could replace the word "gay" with "black," and you'd have the same thing.
Well, and yeah, he's another one. He's a protected. He's one of the protected ones that went off the reservation.
Right, exactly. And so for them, suddenly what was bigoted 10 minutes ago, now all of a sudden is, well, it's understandable because you're just not saying the right things. And at no point do they ever stop and say, wait a second, isn't that kind of bigoted to say that you're only allowed
to
say
hypocritical?
what we tell you to say? Yeah, you're only allowed to say what we tell you to say, and anything else is just, that's terrible. And we are justified to use the same slurs that we tell everyone else you're not allowed to ever use or say in any context because that's bigoted. And they
we're doing it for your own good.
Right, because
I want to ask you a question because we kind of touched on this a little bit. If the left can't be reasoned with, right? Because like you said, or they can't be persuaded one way or the other because like you said, they'll shift the goalposts to double down. How do you, I mean, the big word now is whataboutism, right? Anytime you point out the fact that they flipped they flipped on a position that 2 seconds ago they held the opposite, literally 2 seconds ago, right?
Cases, yes.
It's like, okay, I can't, how do you reason then with someone if they're not even willing to stay consistent on their positions?
Yeah, it's the same thing we heard during 2016. What have conservatives ever conserved? We've gained 1,000 seats on the federal, state level. You know, 13 governorships, however many seats in Congress and the Senate. That's how you win. Fighting on Twitter. I keep saying this on our show. Twitter is not real life. Twitter is the hyperbolic little temper tantrum that you watch a 5-year-old have when they can't get a piece of candy that they want in the store. And that's Twitter on all sides. It's just a distillation of every point that you could possibly make. And that's not real life.
I was saying now, a year ago, I would have agreed with that. And I still want to, but a part of me, because I talk to people all the time, and John and I try to we try to get outside of Twitter with the people that we engage with, and we try to network and we try to interact with people in real life, right? That's one of the reasons why we have guests on the show and we do the show, is so that people can see the human behind the account, right? And the more we do this, I'm not convinced that holds true anymore. A year ago, I would have said, yes, you're absolutely right. Twitter's not real life. It's a microcosm. It's just people being stupid and petty, right? But now it seems that stupidity and that pettiness, whatever that social media virus is that has us at each other's throats. It's like that whatever virus causes people to become zombies, right? Social media is the vector or the ground zero for it, and now it's spreading out into real life because we talk to people who have lost family, lost friends, in terms of being cut off because they supported Trump or because of their political views or what have you. And so whatever sickness that was once contained to social media, it seems to be metastasizing.
But that actually says more about the people who are cutting those other people out than it does
the people who are being cut out.
I still don't want to say, I don't know. I'm in the sticks, man. I mean, so I don't see it that much. I mean, my neighbor, he's retired Hollywood and he's prefers socialism. Him and I can sit back and talk and have a great time with each other, but when it comes to politics, we're just kind of like, yeah, I'm a libertarian, we're not going to agree on anything. So he'll be like, okay, cool. Hey,
we've had the conversations. We actually had a Hillary Clinton staffer on about a month or two ago. Anafi Wahed.
Yep.
She is a
put the phlegm in there.
Wahed. You got to do the head. Lovely woman, very intelligent, very sweet. We weren't going to agree on the majority of things. She's very passionate about immigration. I have different views on immigration than she does, although I find I'm able more to bridge the gap between conservatives and liberals because of my experience. But we're never going to agree on abortion. We're never going to agree on what the size of government should be. But she's a sensible person. You can talk to those people, right? My concern is, what do you do with the people who decide that wearing pussy hats and going and marching on Congress over non-existent problems and curling up into the fetal position and crying, you know, resist, resist, resist. Those people think that's like a rational display of intelligence, and you're like, I don't know how to reason with those people.
You can't, because those are the people who are on social media,
right?
That you're looking at a Twitter user right there,
right? Well, and it's like that the thread that Elaine put up, you know, that, you know, people melting down over things that honestly don't matter, you know. And not to you know, abuse, like, you know, the, you know, in my family, but I'm just saying, okay, I don't know if you know who Idi Amin was, you know.
Oh yeah.
Okay, my dad was alive during that. That's where he was. He okay, when he was, I think, like a teenager or early 20s. That was happening where he was. So it, to me, knowing stuff like that, he would show me video of like what was going on during that. It gave me a lot of perspective. You know, that's why when I look at this country, I tend to think, you know, all the worst things we can say about what's happening in America don't hold a candle to that. Okay, surviving the purges of Idi Amin is way worse than literally anything that this country has to offer. Anything, even the worst that it has, it doesn't even come close to that. So I have to at some point recognize that, look, we were not fans of Donald Trump here either. But the idea that someone is melting down, saying that, "Oh my God, you know, I'm gonna die. That the Trump is gonna kill me. He's oppressing every." I'm sorry, but in no way and at no point is that true. I cannot sympathize with that type of thinking. Because,
well, I can't. I mean, losing your shit over Kavanaugh. Kavanaugh is the most white bread, boring person I have ever. Aside from Keg City, which you got to give, you know, that melting down over that, I can't relate to that person. And this goes back to your question. No, this is not someone you can talk to. I can talk to my neighbor who is pro-socialism, and he's old enough to have been alive to, you know, and that's kind of the one thing you talk about with millennials. We touched on this earlier, with why so many millennials gravitate to socialism is because they were not alive when the Soviet Union fell.
Right.
They didn't see the bodies hanging from the barbed wire on the Berlin Wall. They didn't see Ceausescu gunning people down. They didn't see I'm drawing a blank on that one right now. Poland, Lech Walesa, didn't see any of that. You know, so they just look at it as whatever they learned from their social studies teacher in college, and there's, you know,
even though Denmark says differently, and they just ignore that and keep saying it's just what Europe is doing. It's what the rest of the civilized world is doing. The developed world, everybody's got socialized healthcare. Why can't we? We're just the last developed country in the world that just hasn't figured it out.
Yeah, and we're also the only developed country in the world that's put a man on the moon. So fuck off.
Right, exactly. So, you know.
Well, now, you know, we're talking about censorship and the problems that it creates. So how do you combat the censorship then? Because right now, at least in social media, and I get social media is not the end all be all, but I do think that the kind of toxic culture that is being cultivated in social media is metastasizing outside of it, and so I think you have to nip the bud at the source. You have to take care of it, and one of the things that kind of came up when Ted Cruz grilled Mark Zuckerberg, which I thought was actually kind of a brilliant approach. I'd never heard of, I was never familiar with the Telecommunications Act or specifically the CD. I think it's called the CDA. I don't know what that stands for. It's but the Section 230, right? Are you familiar with that at all?
I could say I could brush up on it, and I would be. I'm familiar to know what the Telecommunications Act was.
So the basic premise of Section 230 is, let's say I'm the New York Times, right? My First Amendment rights as a private business, the New York Times, I can editorialize, I can print whatever the hell I want, right? I can print total lies. It doesn't have to be true. This is what the New York Times does. But I'm protected by the First Amendment, right?
Right, but okay, because
Now,
they're a content creator, not a content provider. I remember that's
correct. And what that does, but now there are limits, right? There are limits. I can't use my printing press to issue bomb threats or to issue calls for
sedition or whatever. Yeah.
Right. If I actually start committing crimes with my printing press, I'm going to get slapped down really quick.
Right.
Right. But now in this day and age of telecommunications and the internet, we have a situation where I might be providing content and I'm protected by the First Amendment. But then I also have these forums, right? I have these chat rooms and, these different public access where anyone can come in and they can say anything, right?
Right.
And, if they say something that's illegal or if they do something that's illegal, I shouldn't be held responsible for that. That's what Section 230 does, right? If I'm the New York Times and I'm printing something online and somebody comes into the comment section and says something stupid like, I want to blow up the Twin Towers, whatever. Right? Okay, I'm not going to be held responsible for a bomb threat that happens in my comment section. So now I can try to regulate it, I can try to mediate it or comment or moderate it, but and still not be held responsible. But nothing's going to happen to me, regardless of my ability to moderate or not. Where Ted Cruz came out and kind of interpreted Section 230 to mean is like, look, you're right. If you are a public forum where anybody can come in and say what they want, then yeah, absolutely, you shouldn't be held legally responsible for illegal activity that happens on your service. But the moment you start editorializing, right? The moment you start saying, okay, these views are okay, these views are not.
Right.
And it was kind of interesting. There's a lot of free speech absolutists, and I actually think they're just fascists in sheep's clothing. And social media apologists, they hated that. They're like, that's not what the Section 230 means. That's not what the intent was. I was like, it may not have been what the intent was, but it's how it's written.
Yeah.
Right.
The intent of the First Amendment was, yeah, okay. We can go back to the whole quill and paper thing too. With yeah, no, and no, I believe Ted Cruz was right on that. I think that if Facebook wants to play both sides of the fence on that, it's the same thing I have with bloggers. Bloggers want to have all the protection of the First Amendment, but none of the responsibility,
right,
that goes with it. And I'm really hesitant when I hear people say that, well, social media should be treated like a public utility. No, because then government gets to pick the winners and losers.
Right.
But I mean, that's kind of the hard thing to juggle here, right? Is how do you, if Twitter's is going around and saying, you know what, you're conservative and we don't like you, we're going to kick you out. We can argue. I think that's their First Amendment right. I think they can do that. They're a private entity, right? Which is another thing that bugs me. Is people don't seem to know the difference between a public service and a private one. It's like, just because the public has access to it doesn't mean it's public. Right. But I digress.
When you have access to Starbucks, it's still private.
Yeah, it's publicly traded. It's still a private entity.
Right.
It's not provided by the government, guys.
Yeah.
So, but there's a part of me that says, okay, look, if they want to kick us out, let them kick us out.
Right.
But then, a friend of mine at Twitter side, the Safe Space Assassin, she just reported and blasted out a tweet. She said, guys, report this tweet. And it's a video from some asshole of children being abused, physically abused, right? That kind of shit should be kicked off of Twitter. It's very difficult to get rid of it, apparently, compared to, if you brigade report a leftist or conservative.
Or you make a Tide Pod joke, you're gone like that.
Right. Or if you say, hey, did you know the Nation of Islam is violent? Not Islam, the Nation of Islam. That organization whose founder they just unverified because he's a raging anti-Semite?
Yeah.
Oh, there was one too. But yeah,
but I wasn't going to open that can of worms. I wasn't going to open that can of worms.
Right. But the Nation of Islam, yeah, totally.
If they want to kick us out, let them kick us out. But then I want them held personally responsible for every pedophilia tweet, for every illegal gun sale, for every Hamas tweet. And then what's the other thing that technically speaking, isn't Twitter like 13 and up. Like you have to be 13 or more older to download it.
Correct.
But there's porn.
Right.
And it's illegal to distribute porn to a minor. Like they don't get in trouble for that.
Yeah, no, I mean, these are all great points. And this is once again, social media and bloggers, because I mean, really social media is just a microblogging site. So they want both ends of it. They don't want to be responsible, but they want all the protection. And given my treatment on Twitter, I love it when Twitter loses in court. Like that thing with Ricky Vaughn. That I hate everything about Ricky Vaughn, but the fact that the judge kind of went, he's got a case, and we're going to let this proceed. And that's where I'm just like going, yeah, that's great. I don't think Ricky should be silenced. I think he should be kicked in the teeth every now and then. But once again, whatever. So
metaphorically speaking.
Yeah, otherwise we're getting to the Richard Spencer should be punched territory.
Right. Well, that's once again talking about the shifting goalposts of the left. I was talking about this a while ago with Borax Cross Archer. He when you make it okay to punch a Nazi and then 2 weeks later you call everybody who disagrees with you a Nazi.
Right. Yeah.
So it's like, well, how could you argue against punching Nazis? Well, you've just said that, and now you're going to open the Overton window to everybody.
You just said that this little cute pug was a Nazi because his owner taught him how to Sieg Heil. Like,
right.
And see,
that's punch a puppy now.
But see, that's the point right there, is that second point is the point that the left doesn't want to even acknowledge. What they want to say is, but look, it's a Nazi. You should be able to punch a Nazi. And most people would say, okay, Nazis are really bad. But what they don't want anyone to ask after that is, okay, but who are you calling a Nazi? I had a friend on Facebook unfriend me over that very question. This was a couple of years ago, but still, he did that, where he just said, I don't want to hear anybody criticize Antifa because the name says anti-fascist. That's what it means. How can you be against that? And if you are, I'll unfriend you. So I said, okay. Who are they calling fascist, though? Never got an answer. He unfriends me because you're not allowed to ask. You're supposed to just assume that Antifa is anti-fascist, so therefore anyone they oppose must be a fascist. No questions asked. They just are. And then when you question, are they really? Oh my God, I can't believe it. You must be okay with fascism. Oh,
yeah, and that's this is everything the left does. You look at Roe v. Wade, safe, legal, and rare. And now it's abortions on demand.
Yeah, what was it? What's her name? Michelle Wolf with the God Bless Abortions. That's where they are now. I was talking to another friend about that recently too. That we've gone from the safe, legal, rare thing is gone, and I don't believe it ever was true.
I don't
always. Yeah, so we're basically at the now abortions are sacred and wonderful.
Yeah. So this is just it. You can't reason with the narrative machine. And so that's where, you ask, what do you do about it? Well, 1,000 seats in Congress, presidency and governorships and state legislatures, because they're the ones who actually allegedly write the laws that make the difference. Somebody screaming on social media or in a comedy show or in their monologue on late night TV, they may help popular opinion, but that popular opinion, we're not a democracy. We don't have the tyranny of the majority where popular opinion drives what we do as a society. So they can shriek all they want, shriek away, kick me off social media if that makes you feel better. My vote cancels yours out.
Right.
So. No, I think that's great advice for anyone. It's like, look, use these forums like we do to try to persuade people. Right, but to persuade them to vote a certain way, persuade them to put pressure on their elected representatives, so that these representatives can actually enforce the laws and kind of create peace and stability between these two warring factions. So we're out of time for this was a great discussion. So thanks for coming on the show, Ordy.
I know, right?
And it went really fast. It's, time flies when you're having fun.
Right.
So we'll definitely have you back on when you got time. I know you're busy. For our audience that maybe aren't familiar with your show, where can they find you?
We're on the Sparks Radio Network. You can get us on Spreaker. It is One Nation Under Foo Bar. I host a show every week with Politibunny, and occasionally I fill in or show up on KLRN shows too. So you can find me anywhere. Find me as Ordy. What am I now? Ordy Packard on Twitter.
I had to look it up myself. I'm like, wait, what is he now?
Yeah. So.
Well, and we do have a question for the comment for you. Like, what is the show actually about? Because apparently it's a little bit like the rap session from the PBS show called Zoom.
Wait, our show?
Yeah.
It's basically, yeah, it's, we used to do top 10 douchebags, but it got tiresome because it was the exact same people every week. So that kind of, and then we just turned it into, we just cover whatever happens on Twitter that it used to be in the week, but now it's whatever people are freaking about that particular Wednesday when we're doing the show.
It's amazing. Like it's amazing how quickly it changes. You're just like, okay, well, John and I do so. Like, okay, we need to find a guest. We want to talk about this topic. We finally get the guest scheduled 3 weeks in advance. And we're like, well, that topic died. Hey, do you want to talk about this instead?
Right? Yeah.
Well, that's what you do. We were going to talk about climate change, and it's like, hey, let's talk about the cruelty.
Censorship. I mean, yeah, it's like nobody's talking about climate change, but
what it's
censorship.
worth, I completely forgot what we were going to talk about, so it works out.
Yeah.
Thanks, John.
So cool. This was a lot of fun.
Well, we'll definitely have you back on for the climate change.
Yeah, anytime. Yeah, that's everybody has their wheelhouse. That one's mine.
Okay. Yes, no, we've had some great conversations on that, but like you said, with the topic being as crazy as it is about and people getting banned or fired or silenced left and right, and with your experience and my experience with getting shut down by people that just did not like us having opinions, this is an important conversation. Like, I want to be able to have conversations with people that disagree with me. That's how I learn. Right? Either I'm wrong and I learn why I'm wrong, or I'm right and I learn how to defend it better. Like, that's the value of debate, and that's why we should be having these debates. So if you aren't following Ordy, make sure you're following him at Ordy Packard. Make sure you're also following John at Firelight Phoenix. The Phoenix is spelled F-E-N-I-X.
Yep.
And make sure you're following the podcast at ornery_opinions. Subscribe and share. This will post later tonight, so if you missed a show or you came in late and you want to watch the parts you missed, you feel free to watch it again. Ordy, thanks again for coming on the show, man. You have a great night.
Hey,
Next week, guys, the show is going to be 1 hour early. We're going to have it at 9 p.m. Eastern. One of our guests has a scheduling conflict, so we're going to accommodate that. So make sure you're here an hour early. And we will see you guys next week. You have a good week.